Other people always let you down. Why don't you just forget about them and do something for yourself?
Like what?
I don't know. Something you're good at. And I don't mean shopping.
Maybe some of us aren't good at anything.
Every grown-up is good at something. Oh, my bad. I don't see any grown-ups around here.
Welcome to the Graveyard Slot, where we talk about movies past their prime time.
Here we revisit old favorites with a fresh perspective to see if they deserve more credit or if they should stay buried. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Sohini, and today we're talking about Uptown Girls. Before we get started, we wanted to encourage whoever might be listening to donate to help the people of Sudan. An organization we want to mention is the Sudanese American Physicians Association, which provides emergency aid to physicians and healthcare organizations in Sudan.
We encourage you to donate to the Sudan Relief Fund, which is collecting money to provide medical supplies, resources, and humanitarian relief. Please go to sapa-usa.org to donate.
So this episode we're talking about Uptown Girls. When Molly Gunn loses all of her inheritance money, she's forced to take on a job as a nanny for 8-year-old Ray. Hijinks ensue.
I mean, I don't know if I'd call them hijinks. Sad hijinks.
Sad hijinks ensue. The movie was released in 2003, and it has the same director as movies, including The Rookie and Now You See Me. The movie's director is actually Israeli-American, and he has previously expressed pro-Israeli views.
Yeah, sucks. Don't give money to this guy. We looked him up and he's done like books and articles and stuff on it, so definitely confirmed. Don't support him.
Yeah. When we first decided to watch this movie and discuss it for the podcast, we weren't aware of this fact, but now that we are, we just want to make it clear that we're not endorsing his work or anything like that, and we definitely don't share his views either.
Yeah. But if you do see this movie, keep in mind that it's coming from this director and whatever biases may be in it.
Yeah, something to keep in mind.
Yeah. We wanted to discuss this movie because, for one, I've always been aware of it and had a vague positive impression of it, and was really surprised when we discovered that it only had 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it seemed like the perfect candidate for TGS, a movie that critics would disparage for bullshit reasons, and I guess we'll find out in our discussion.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that that's the reason you wanted to watch this movie.
Ah, right.
I did not know about this movie, and I watched it because you made me watch.
I'm sorry, okay?
It'll take more than that.
Okay, I'm not that sorry, but we didn't exactly have an enjoyable experience, let's put it that way.
It seems like critics didn't have an enjoyable time of it either, because most of the reviews I came across were very negative, very harsh, even criticizing it for things that it didn't do. One such review that I felt was a big misunderstanding of the characters was from Village Voice, and it says, locates Fanning's maturity in a fear of germs that comes off as borderline psychotic.
Whoa.
And Murphy's childlike free spirit in her apparent inability to avoid walking into walls, which is such a superficial view of what these characters are. The whole point is that Brittany Murphy's character Molly is not a free spirit. There are a bunch of traumas burdening her that she needs to deal with, and reducing Dakota Fanning's character, Ray, into just a germaphobe also does such a disservice to anything positive about this movie.
Yeah.
So I don't understand this critique of the movie.
It's also like, okay, you don't get it then. The mere reduction of Ray's character to just a germaphobe is like, okay, you don't understand how that aspect plays into her character, or like how that's a tool for the narrative.
Exactly. There was also another one from Toronto Star that said, can two over-pampered but fundamentally lonely persons of the blonde female persuasion bond meaningfully with each other while shopping? And not once in the movie, as far as I recall, do they go shopping. Not that there's anything wrong with shopping, but they don't do it as a bonding activity.
That's hilarious.
What movie was this person watching?
I think they were watching Bratz. Yeah, talking about baffling reviews, I have one that's like extra baffling. It's from the Austin Chronicle, and it says, well-worn phrases and plot developments are repeated here as though the world had never heard of Cinderella. And I'm like, what does this movie have to do with Cinderella?
I actually have no idea what the critics are saying. The reviews have nothing to do with the movie. Genuinely, this is concerning.
Yeah. But there are a couple that actually applies to this movie. There's one from the Los Angeles Times that read, Uptown Girls is more downer than upper, which is great wordplay there. And one from the Boston Globe that read, the feel-bad movie of the summer. I love these two.
I agree.
But I think what's happening here with the low ratings is that people are judging it or reviewing it with their misconceptions in mind. And it sucks because, like, you can't just say a movie is bad because it's sad. No one's like, Sophie's Choice is so fucking sad. 10%. Like, it's not like this movie isn't aware of its own themes and sadness.
Agreed.
So we are discussing this movie chronologically, as always. And we actually start on a voiceover narration coming from Ray. And it's talking about a princess story and how it's the eve of this princess's 22nd birthday. And we see Molly late to her own birthday party and then meeting her friends. And we see the circles that she's in.
I have to say, I was very overwhelmed watching this movie.
Same.
But one of the things that really struck me right at the beginning was the set design, especially Molly's apartment. We kind of get glimpses of her living space as the voiceover is telling us about a princess who lived high above the streets of an enchanted kingdom. And I thought this introduction was quite interesting because it's not that she lives in the enchanted kingdom, but we rather get a sense of someone who's hidden away and sequestered above the place where life truly happens. And the set design does a good job of reinforcing this because it's a very eclectic space. It's very cluttered and far removed from reality almost. There's also the sense of it being like nothing you've ever seen before. You couldn't find this place anywhere else.
Yeah, it's like a tone world.
Yeah, exactly.
I absolutely adore the set design, especially in Molly's room. I get so emotional over everything in this movie, but specifically Molly's apartment. I love the arches.
Yeah, very grand.
Arched.
And yes, they are very arched. That's their one job,
Yeah.
and they're doing it. We see her get ready for her party, and as she does, we see a bunch of decor and knickknacks, and her clothes are kind of littered all over them. And I quite like that as a symbol of her making the best of her situation and working around the things that she was left with, which are literal physical reminders of the people who left those things with her, as well as the physical burden that she carries. She's kind of adapting it to her own use and trying to fit those things around her daily life. And together with the grandness of the setting, like you mentioned the arches, and then there's also this giant staircase that we see her running down. There's this huge stack of gifts in the lobby. It all makes her seem so small in comparison. It's like her surroundings swallow her up, and she's trying to adjust around these situations that she can't change.
I totally agree with everything you said. Also, in regards to the whole clothes everywhere thing, I also really like how it looks real.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the sense that what you see is like her underwear and random clothing and stuff. It's like obviously not a universal thing, but this is what it often is like for a single woman to live on her own. There are these knickknacks, weird things from her childhood, her lacy bra on the lampshade, whatever. It felt like an honest depiction, a quirky depiction, but an honest one nonetheless.
Yes, we see kind of a mishmash of, as you say, an adult woman's belongings contrasted with these items from her childhood that she just can't let go. And it's an indication of where she's at mentally. The fact that a part of her is still where she was at 8 years old when she lost her parents. She hasn't been able to process that trauma, and her surroundings are a big indication of that.
On that subject, it's so funny to me that this whole movie is about her grief over her dad. And like her mom also passed away. It's understandable if there's like a story behind it. Maybe she wasn't close to her mom or whatever. Like I don't know. But so it's just funny to me that the entire movie is about her dad.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, we see her friends and her friends' friends at the club. We see her talking to lots of groups of people, and there's a lot of talk about youth and not wanting to grow old or look older or whatever. At first, knowing where this movie goes and what it actually focuses on, I wasn't sure how this actually relates to the main themes, but there's this part in the bathroom where she's worrying about worry wrinkles and how she shouldn't have them because she lives a worryless life. That honestly ties it together really well, in my opinion, especially knowing what we do explore later on in the movie with the main characters' backstories.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily have made that connection, but now that you mention it, this is the first time we see her come to a halt, because up until this point, she's been very...
Right, go, go, go.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing phases her. So yeah, this is the initial introduction to the start of her worries. And speaking of worrying, there's one more character we need to mention at this point, which is Ray. Molly meets her in the bathroom, and immediately Ray actually sees through Molly's facade. She actually recognizes Molly's shoes as something she would have worn at a younger age. And she also sees that Molly's hair tie, which she got complimented on earlier, is actually not even a hair tie. It's like something she DIY'd. So immediately we have these two different characters because Molly is very like...
all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place and childlike, whereas Ray is introduced as this very serious and no-nonsense kind of kid.
Yeah. I love Ray's introduction, especially the instant contrast. It's also fun that their first meeting is in a bathroom in front of this wall of mirrors. It's also like a place where you wouldn't put on facades, you know, like you don't have your armor in there. You're just there to like regroup or fix whatever. So I think it was interesting that they meet each other in that place. In a literary sense, it's interesting, even though I wouldn't necessarily say it applies to real life.
I like that a lot. Because we do see that. Like we said, it's the first time that Molly is expressing any kind of doubts about herself.
I just realized something. Ray is Molly, right? I'll just say now, Ray is Molly. But like, the fact that it happens right at the moment when Molly has this moment now makes me think Ray is fake. Ray is like a figment of her imagination, or like...
Please don't do this.
A fairy godmother or something. It didn't occur to me how true that is. That she literally appears at the moment that Molly is at this turning point.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've come up with a theory.
No, please. Not the theories. But we do find out that Ray is Molly's friend Huey, his boss's daughter. So she is real. So I'm going to put us up to that theory right there.
But we do meet someone new, aside from Ray, and that is Neil Fox, who is playing at the club. And the extreme zoom onto the most mediocre looking man of all time will never not be funny to me. I get from like the rest of the movie that he needs to start kind of nothing because later on there's this whole thing about him being fabricated. But like, it's just so hard to buy that Molly is immediately into him. This isn't disparaging the actor's looks. He's fine. It's just like in this scene, he's not portrayed as special or anything. Like he's just some guy playing guitar. It's not like she starts off knowing that he's unattainable. So I just don't know what she's into here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also had a really hard time understanding why Molly was so drawn to him. Maybe there is something in the fact that he does music. She has a complicated relationship with music because her dad was a musician, but I don't think that's really explored.
Her circles are like musicians. Her friend Huey works at a record label. Rona, I don't know if she's the owner or just the boss of the record label. And we see here some guy wanting to talk to Molly about some song he did or demo he did or something and trying to hit on her. So like there's something special about this guy. If everyone else had been non-musician people, then it would make more sense. But yeah.
I think it's his jacket, his lucky jacket. That's what she's drawn to. She sees the potential to tear it apart.
Yeah. You know what? I think you've cracked it.
I thought it was interesting that Huey only invited Neil to perform so that his boss could see, not because he was thinking of Molly, like what kind of performer would Molly like at her birthday party. It was more like a business thing.
Knocked it out of the park, though.
Yeah, I mean, he did a good job, apparently. But the whole thing kind of seemed not really necessarily related to Molly, because when she arrived, the first thing she said was, I thought it was just gonna be the three of us.
Right.
But it seemed like they kind of arranged it around her. There's that sense of her life taking place around her and her not really having anything to do with it.
That's a good point. So there's this interesting thread about how Molly and people around her seem to put her self-worth in being attractive to men or just romantic and sexual partners in general. And while I do like Molly's growth that we get to see in this respect, I'm not all that sure on how it quite ties into the main themes of the movie. Molly also seems to be into Neil because he's unattainable. And we see this proven time and again when her interest only flares when he's not attentive. But again, I don't know how it relates to the main story. I suppose there's a kind of facet to her character and to the story that has to do with emotional neglect and a lack of parental attention, especially in Ray's case. And Ray is a mirror to Molly, but if that's what it's supposed to be about, I'm not sure how this issue or this topic is resolved exactly. Is it about letting go? What with the ending? With the fate of the guitars and Ray's dad? I guess it feels like there's kind of a thread about, for lack of a better word, daddy issues that it's honestly resolved in quite a realistic and restrained manner where it's not necessarily solved, but it comes to a resolution. But I don't think the movie says anything interesting or anything at all about parental neglect because we don't see any resolution in Roma's case. I don't know what it adds to the story that Molly is hot and cold with Neil and only hot when he's not into her.
I agree. Throughout the movie, I got really tired of the thread with Molly and Neil, to be honest. It sort of felt like they were trying to add one more thing to preoccupy her mind while she was also trying to deal with everything else. But I also didn't feel like they were doing anything interesting with that thread. The way you parallel it with Ray's storyline of parental neglect with her mother is interesting, but yeah, I agree with you. They don't actually say anything, so it kind of feels not pointless, but just superficial.
I mean, I will give it that it is interesting to see on one side Ray being like stone-faced against Roma's treatment of her, and on the other side we see Molly calling up Neil and leaving messages. Like, it feels like it's a depiction of like each other's like inner emotional state, which is really interesting but doesn't quite go anywhere. But despite all odds, Molly does get Neil to come home with her, presumably with the temptation of her father's guitars.
Yeah.
I love the shot of them in the hallway from inside the apartment. It's dark in the apartment, so the doorway to the hallway is the only source of light. And Neil is asking if it's true that she's Tommy Gunn's daughter. And so she reenacts what I have to assume is like her father's signature move with like the guitar. But it's really great because you only get a partial view of them through this doorway and a partial view of Molly's moves. And I love how much it tells us about Molly and her life and history and her father, because like they never say anything explicitly. It's just we can infer from this scene that, oh, he was this rock star guy. I love tiny scenes that do double duty or triple duty or whatever, and this does infinite duties.
Yeah, I really like this scene as well. I like the visual of them framed by the doorway and the stark contrast of the hallway light and the utter complete darkness of her house, which we later learn is because they've cut off the electricity supply in her apartment. And I like the way that it reduces the size of the screen almost. Like you're seeing just a slice of the screen and they're framed against it. Compared to even everything that comes afterwards when they're bonding and talking and all of that, this feels more personal almost, more intimate than anything else.
Yeah. But Neil, even though he does get to see Tommy Gunn's guitars, he pulls the worst move. He's so tone deaf because he sings his date's dead dad's song about his date. That's just a weird song to sing to your date.
That's the thing. He's not thinking about her at all because the line he says is he opened the show with it. And I think that's a simple way of, showing the way people see and treat Molly because nothing is truly for her. It's often related to her dad. And with this line, suddenly the flowers that were lining the hallway outside her apartment and the pile of gifts in the lobby, they made a lot more sense because it's not really hers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wondered, who are these gifts from? Because we don't really get to know more friends of hers aside from Ingrid and Huey. And it's one thing to go to the club for that girl's party who's semi-famous. And it's another to send a thing to her address. So yeah, that's interesting.
And she donates it all too. She doesn't even bother opening one.
Right, yeah. But so Neil does stay the night and they talk and stuff. But Neil has a thing about never doing the things he wants to do. I'm honestly not sure if his character is supposed to be talking about actual sobriety because not having relationships early in your sobriety is a real thing. But I don't know if that's what his character is saying. I guess I don't know if he's supposed to be sober because he's an alcoholic or if it's just because it's a thing that is difficult.
No idea.
Yeah.
They never really delved that deep into his character for us to find out.
I guess there's a way you can see the story as Molly is his downfall. Even though he was not good at what he was doing, he was at least trying to be good at it, and Molly is the one who kind of sends him down this rabbit hole of selling out and shit. Because there's this part where Neil plays Molly his song, and she's giving him these insights about how purple is a good color for him and his rock and roll image and how his song is musically stagnant. It needs more variety, and he's just being a pretentious brooding dude. And not because he talks about not wanting to be a sellout, because fair enough, but because Molly is talking about adding a hook to his song in an artistic sense to make for a better song. But he immediately equates it and the point about wearing purple, which has complete potential to have artistic merit. He equates all that to selling out without any further discussion or consideration. He seems to be too fixated on not being a sellout than to properly be an artist. All this to say, Molly does kind of trigger this for him and his character, so that brings me back to the sobriety thing. Especially the way it's portrayed throughout the rest of the movie, it kind of is she keeps bringing him back down, either down the path of metaphorical alcoholism or, the path of choosing to sell out. For him, that's what triggers it.
Interesting. I guess watching the movie, I was more inclined to root for Molly to find her self-respect and not chase after Neil. But thinking of it that way, I guess to some degree he is also a sort of victim of this relationship or whatever it is. The relationship just doesn't do anything good for either him or for Molly.
Right. So Molly's on the phone with Ingrid about not being able to get rid of Neil and feeling suffocated. But then Neil has to head out and she does a 180 and basically chases after him. And I really like how the cartoons on Molly's TV reflects the narrative because we see the cartoon character falling into this ravine when we see Molly falling out of infatuation with Neil after the purple hook fiasco. And then we see the cartoon character run comically when Molly runs after Neil when he's leaving, which was just a fun little tidbit that I liked.
That's a really great observation. I didn't catch that. But now that I think about it, I think it was Wile E. Coyote they were showing on the TV, and he's always chasing after the Roadrunner. So that's a great parallel to Molly always chasing after Neil.
Yeah. But Ingrid comes over to check on her and discover that Bob, the person who was handling Molly and her family's money, has scammed her and now she's broke.
Yeah. Before we get there, there's this part where Ingrid is shocked at the state of Molly's apartment, and to try and clean up, she picks up a couple takeaway boxes from this giant pile of rubbish and puts it in this tiny little rubbish bin that gets filled immediately.
She puts 3 things in it and it's immediately full, I counted.
Yeah, I think it's a funny but also an effective visual representation of Molly's friends trying to do damage control in her life, even though it's obviously going to take more than that. And it also goes to show how ill-equipped Molly is.
Right.
But yeah, they consult a lawyer who advises Molly to get a job. It's a reality check.
Yeah. So actually, Ingrid hooks her up with a job. Alongside getting a job there, she also shops. So she gets these nice Egyptian cotton sheets. And she actually goes to bring those sheets to Neil. And it is interesting how these luxuries in her world truly are items of value worthy of a change of heart or whatever. She assigns such specific powers to these things that to a regular person, or at least to me, seem ridiculous. Like how the thread count of these sheets will be the thing to tempt Neil back to her side. But to her, and in her world, in the kind of life she lives, to an uptown girl, you might say, that's just a fact of life. But it was really interesting because I found it really funny when Neil truly is tempted to be with her because of these sheets, but it makes for an interesting part of the narrative. I think it's really interesting how Neil has these sheets with a childish pattern on them, because so far we've seen how Molly is portrayed as quite immature as a contrast to her peers, and as we'll discover throughout the movie, how adolescence plays into the main themes. But we see here that Neil, behind closed doors, is actually just as stunted and immature as she is. Obviously, I don't actually mean this in real life, that patterned sheets are either childish or telling of your maturity. It's just a very interesting way that the movie uses this tool that I genuinely adore and didn't really clock the first time around.
That's really interesting. I'm wondering whether a part of the reason Neil still has those sheets is because he just can't afford anything better, but it all kind of does align with, you know, his tendencies to bluff and to kind of hide behind his persona. I mean, I guess that's kind of what being an adult is really, but you know, fake it till you make it.
Yeah, even if it's not specifically about Neil and how he's hiding this, it's just like we all do this. Like we all have sheets from our younger years at home. You know, Molly just wears the sheets out.
Yeah. I really love the reveal we get in the next scene because we had just seen Molly seducing Neil, and the next thing we see is her waking up swaddled in those sheets, except it's not the same sheets because she's back at the store. She slept there, and everyone obviously finds her in the morning, and she gets in trouble and gets fired.
Yeah, and Huey hooks her up with a job as nanny for Ray. Who could have guessed that's where this movie is going? So, the movie has really weird pacing. It feels so slow. And I wish we had just jumped into her being nanny for Ray. This is an easy thing to cut out of the movie.
Actually, it kind of made me think about how it's a pattern that Ingrid initially tries to help Molly, only for it to fail, and then Huey comes in and helps her in a different way that works out better for her.
Yeah, you're right.
And maybe it's an indication of how, while Ingrid has good intentions, she doesn't really know Molly, doesn't really understand her needs.
I don't think I agree with you, but I do see your point. I think Molly's being a dick here. The pattern I'm noticing is like Molly keeps spitting in Ingrid's face. Like she's just trying to help. She could say no if she's like, I don't want to work at Bendel's.
I mean, I agree. Molly is definitely not taking the situation as seriously as she should, but I feel like she's not even aware of the extent to which Ingrid is helping her.
Yeah, but we finally see Molly as Ray's nanny, and I love the shot of Molly in Ray's sunglasses. I know they've met once before at the club, but in this new relationship, even in its first introduction, Molly is depicted as a reflection of Ray. Or the other way around, I guess. But it's such a cool shot, and such an effective tool.
I agree. It's very striking. It's also effective in conveying Ray's palpable horror at seeing Molly approach her. It's like seeing Godzilla looming over her. But Molly picks her up from school, and we see Ray's room. Well, her house and her room.
We do. On a similar note to the sunglasses shot, I do really like all the distortion that greets Molly when she's in Ray's home. The shot of her entering the living room is her reflection on a large wall-mounted mirror, and Ray's bedroom door emits a strange glow and is down a dim hallway that's shot with this warped zoom. It really feels like she stepped into almost like a dreamlike land. It's like this whole experience is Molly going through the looking glass to finally grow up by helping this mirror image of a little girl overcome her parallel struggles. She even passes by a dying parent before entering Ray's curated room of a child. She's also asked to take off her shoes, and I haven't mentioned this, but she's dressed very childlike with a baby pink tank top and a skirt overall covered in patches, and her heels are the only adult item that she's wearing. This journey of going through the home and hallway to arrive at Ray's room is like her own journey to get to where she is now in life. The loss of her parent, which led to her abandoning any desire to grow up and be an adult, and confining herself at this dead end of perpetual childhood, what with Ray's room being at the end of a hallway and depicted as the light at the end of the tunnel.
Wow, that was amazing. So we get to see Ray's room, and it's a stark contrast to Molly's space. It's very organized, it's very curated, and the centerpiece of this room is this little tea party setup, complete with plastic scones. And Molly sits down immediately, even though she's not been invited. But it's kind of like a metaphor for the way Molly has barged into Ray's life in general. It's at this point that Ray offhandedly tells Molly that she's been seeing a therapist since she was 3 years old. This little tidbit subtly tells us that in contrast to Molly, who has held on to her immaturity and childlike tendencies, Ray has had to grow up at a very young age. And so Molly and Ray are great foils of each other, because even though they have gone through or are going through similar journeys and have similar traumas, they are kind of leaning in opposite directions in the way that they react to their respective situations.
Yeah. How meticulously everything has been laid out in Ray's room and stuff. It's a facade. Like, she's putting everything in its place to look like it's a child's room, but
she interacts with it in such a different way.
Yeah, she doesn't, it's not genuine. Like, she is not in that place. The one thing I did really like was the part where Molly exclaims over all the new dolls when the lineup used to be much more limited when Molly was younger. It's like proof that life has moved on and trudged on outside of her little bubble.
That's a really great point. I love her enthusiasm. That is really how a child would react to seeing a favorite toy or something that they'd been coveting but hadn't been able to get their hands on. It's her childish tendencies coming through.
So they have dinner and Ray makes her do the dishes in the scene. Like I said, I think a lot of the poor reception of this movie is due to the misplaced expectations of a fun, light movie about femininity instead of one about grief. But an aspect I really do like about the movie, especially on a revisit once I knew what I was getting into, is how weirdly quiet the movie is, and not even necessarily in a low-budget, poor mixing kind of way. It's a very intentional, quiet, and somber tone. Music only comes in at very specific moments, like in Ray's room. A lot of the time, there isn't a score to buoy the audience's emotions along. So here, for example, they're fighting for the plate. And in a movie about light and fun hijinks between a child and her nanny, there'd be fun, playful music backdropping the tussle. But this scene is dead quiet aside from the sounds of their struggle. And it makes for such a different tone than you would expect. It's not supposed to be fun and playful by the time they're truly physically fighting over the plate. And it carries over to the confrontation that follows, where it's really not about, oh, it's a precocious kid bossing around her nanny. It's a very charged scene, and you can see the gravity with which the actors are playing it, that the shit that they're slinging at each other is very much filled with pain.
That is a really great observation. The silence does a great job of underscoring so much that we don't see on the surface. You wouldn't expect a family home to be that quiet, so the silence tells us a lot about the kind of life that Ray has been leading so far, living basically all on her own. This is like one of those videos where with a different soundtrack, it becomes like a totally different genre. Like, I can imagine the kind of music that would be in the background if this were supposed to be a comedy movie or something.
Actually, the rather humorous end with the swinging door is kind of interesting, because since Ray is her other self, it's like whatever hurt she causes, Ray only bounces back because she's hurting herself.
Nice. A lot of our expectations are reverted in this movie, where Ray appears to be the wiser one and the more serious one compared to Molly, who is all over the place and doesn't quite understand things all the time. I also kind of saw the swinging door as an example of that. Ray is well aware of her surroundings and the situation they're in, whereas Molly is ignorant to the reality, I guess.
Yeah. But Molly comes home to find out she's been evicted. And she has this meeting with management, and I do like the harsh contrast of their suits and formal table all set up to Molly's appearance. How it's like real life and adulthood closing in on her. It almost even looks like she's at a much lower seat, even though it's not true. There's just something about the harsh contrast of their looks that makes Molly seem so much smaller than the people she's talking to.
It almost looks like she's at an interview faced by a panel of judges. And she's woefully unprepared. It's like an interview for adulthood.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's like adulthood is judging her and sees her wanting. But she goes to Neil, and Neil doesn't open the door, and then we see him lounging on her sheets, the fucker.
Yeah, the audacity to accept her gift while treating her that way.
Yep. But she ends up staying with Ingrid.
Yeah. Well, Ingrid casually mentions that now that Molly has moved in, she'll be needing to pay half the rent. So Molly has no choice but to return to Ray as her nanny.
Yes. When Molly picks her up, she basically asks Ray for her job back. But I was really surprised and delighted at how Ray looks so hurt in that scene when Molly shows back up. She's not putting on this stone cold face because she's annoyed at Molly. She's hurt that Molly left her the way her parents did. It's a choice in the portrayal that I didn't expect and landed with me.
Yeah, and I mean, the ease with which she accepts Molly back is also a sign of how lonely she must be, because, you know, all she has at home is a nurse walking around tending to her dad and not even acknowledging her presence. So, I mean, it really fits with her character that she is craving human connection. She wants company, even though she doesn't necessarily like Molly being that company. She'll take it.
Yeah. On their way home, I really like this part where Ray flips Molly off and immediately gets told off. It's at the heels of all of this contrast about how Ray's the more mature one between them, despite being 8 years old to Molly's 22. But in this moment, you're reminded that Molly's the adult and has a measure of authority over her. It's also a portrayal of the first time someone's actually told Ray off on her behavior, because she's never had anyone, a parental figure or just someone who cares about her, to ever do that for her, to show her how consequences work and how to behave. Even the supposed reward she gets, a surprise from Molly, takes Ray aback, and there's this look on Ray's face of her being unexpectedly pleased. She's never even had someone be that thoughtful with her before.
Yeah, it just gets sadder and sadder.
But basically, the surprise is that Molly gives Ray her pig because she can't keep Moo at Ingrid's. But I like how a pig, something usually known to be messy and everything, enters Ray's perfectly ordered life at the same time responsibility and order starts to enter Molly's disorganized one.
That checks out, because that's how their arcs intersect. Molly helps Ray loosen up, and Ray helps Molly
Tighten up.
Yeah. So at this point, Ingrid forces Molly to sell her things in an effort to help her get rid of the excess.
I think it's just because she doesn't have her own place anymore. I think they kind of failed with Ingrid's character. I think what they're trying to show is, like you said, Ingrid forcing Molly to sell her stuff, but they never really show us that. With the scenes that we do get, the only impression I get is that Molly needs to sell her stuff and Ingrid is like helping her and being like tough with her because this is what Molly is trying to do. But like, I wish we had actually seen Molly being like, I don't want to do this, and Ingrid being like, you have to, like actually forcing her.
So you think grabbing stuff out of her hand is like not forcing her?
That's the thing, like in the scene I saw Ingrid as harsh but ultimately helpful. Like Molly asked her to help her sell these things. It didn't like come across to me that Molly genuinely doesn't want to do this, which like might just be the way I'm reading it, but to me, this is why Ingrid's character fails, because the way that the movie plays out, I feel like she should have been harsher. We should have actually seen her explicitly force Molly into doing stuff.
Okay, I mean, from my perspective, what we saw was enough. But I mean, I understand what you mean. We don't see the conversation that leads up to this point where all of Molly's stuff is on the street. And at the same time, she also empties out her apartment and puts some of her things in storage. And Ray is there and judges her for letting her things gather dust rather than just selling it all.
Yeah, we have the scene of Molly in her room staring at her dad's guitars. And the frame is filled with the guitars and of Ray with her back to us, and her blonde hair the only identifiable trait in front of the collection of Molly's father's guitars. And it's like Molly's looking at herself with her father, and I want to cry. But yeah, like you said, they're talking about the guitars and how Ray thinks she could and should sell them instead of letting them gather dust in storage. And it's a direct parallel to each of their grief, right? Because Ray's father is in a coma and has been for a long time, and Ray sees him as all but dead, and they're unable to let go because of this stationary state, whereas Molly should let go but is choosing to stagnate. But it was just a very straightforward and harsh, in a good way, of Ray basically saying out loud her take on her father's state.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it, because from Ray's perspective, there's no point in holding on when there's no hope, and that's the way she sees her dad. Like, in her eyes, he is also lying there gathering dust, and she is all but let go, at least on the surface. Like, that is what she is pretending to have done, even though she still very much cares about him and wants him to get better.
Yeah, and Ray is like trapped in this prolonged grief because she can't move on because her father is still dying.
Yeah, and so it makes sense why she would be confused about Molly prolonging her own grief.
Yeah, and we see Ray's resentment against this situation that she's in. But we get this montage of Molly doing laundry, calling Neil, burning Neil's jacket and patching it up in her eclectic style. I have to admit, I love the part where Ray is cheering on Molly and the au pair sprawl.
It's one of those rare moments where...
It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Neil calls. Apparently he got signed, and he plays Molly his demo, which has a new hook thanks to Molly. And this happens while she's sitting on his couch covered in the sheets that she brought with her. And it shows how traces of her are all over his work and his life. I mean, down to the lucky jacket, right? And it really builds the foundation for what we have later on about how Neil isn't real and everything about him is fabricated by other people. But especially by Molly in this scene.
Yeah, and I think the jacket is definitely the culmination of all this, because he refers to it as his lucky jacket, but honestly, it doesn't do anything for him until Molly mutilates it, as he says. And he wears it even though he's initially upset about its made-over state, but that is what sets him apart and is a piece playing a part in his success.
And what does he do to thank her? He fucking breaks up with her.
Honestly, good riddance.
Yeah. I mean, Ray shares our contempt because she also shit talks him when they have their little afternoon tea.
And this is where the plastic scones come in again, because even though they have real tea and food at the table, they still have the scones that Molly starts buttering. And I really liked that inclusion because it's like a reminder that it's a charade to some degree.
Yeah. But I do also like the little talk they have when Ray basically sees through Molly and tells her as much, but how she's scared. These two have so many like somber, serious conversations.
The movie poster really does not let on about all of this. You really do think they'll go shopping and bond, but no.
In this afternoon tea, Ray also reminds Molly that her recital is Friday night. But Friday night comes and Molly is headed for a date. And Ingrid is upset because they had plans and Molly forgot. And Molly's not even sorry. I think this is definitely fueled by my take on Ingrid, or like how I think her character fails. But again, I'm on Ingrid's side. I understand what Mommy's saying, but I think if the movie actually shows Ingrid's behavior as wanting total control of Molly's life, then this would be more equal in my eyes. But so far it hasn't. Ingrid just invites her to stuff and Molly seemingly says yes. Like, Ingrid is already doing all of these things with her friends, right? Like yoga and whatever. And it feels like she's including Molly in it. And we never see Molly unwilling to do these things Ingrid invites her to, mostly because we only see it in a montage, but still. I think this is what they could have done to show this side of Ingrid that is supposedly in this movie, according to Molly. But we should have seen Molly's plans being bulldozed by Ingrid's. And that would have, I think, helped a lot. Even if she's just inviting Molly and including her and stuff. Maybe Ingrid is insistent that, like, no, on Sundays we do this, so we do this. But we never see Molly's plans being uprooted because of Ingrid. Even in this scene, it's a matter of Molly being inconsiderate and not Ingrid insisting that her plans are more important. So, like, I think Molly's the one being a dick here, but I think it's also because they failed at depicting what they were trying to depict with Ingrid's character.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I think it's just a matter of reading things differently, because I did see it kind of similarly to Molly in that it does feel like Ingrid interferes a lot, and on the surface she does step in when Molly needs it and she does try to include Molly in everything, but we don't necessarily see a lot of enthusiastic participation on Molly's side either. Whether it's yoga or baking or whatever, it kind of seems like Molly's always just being pulled along and she's going with the flow, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's happy about it. It doesn't mean that that's what she would have chosen for herself. And the fact that she does struggle and the fact that things don't turn out well, I think, are indications that Ingrid doesn't necessarily have a good understanding of what Molly needs. Like, she's trying to fit her into this version of herself that Molly just isn't ready to step into. She has good intentions and is trying to help Molly, but it just seems like they're not on the same page. As for this argument, I really like how it begins with surface level complaints and then they start to mention their actual resentments that we have seen glimpses of throughout the movie. At least that's the way I read it. But I liked that the things that were shown as kind of comic relief come back to have actual consequences for the characters.
Yeah, that's a good one. What I do like is what they are talking about, like how they view their friendship very differently. Because Ingrid's very hurt that Molly seemingly doesn't even think of her as a friend. I do like how it touches on how different people view friendship or whatever, but I don't think they take it anywhere anyway.
Yeah.
Well, so Molly gets kicked out because of this fight and goes to stay with Huey. And they go out and Molly misses Ray's recital. In the next scene, Ray's kind of upset and Molly's like trying to take her out and Ray's like, I don't want to go anywhere, especially not with you.
So to cheer her up, Molly decides to take her to Coney Island. And we get this shot of Ray looking out the window as the subway zooms away, and I really like the framing of that shot. It kind of reminds me of that doorway shot again. I really like how immersive the cinematography feels sometimes. It really makes you feel like you're a part of the action going on screen, and especially with this subway scene, it's almost like Ray is being swallowed up by some sort of monster. It feels very over dramatic, and I mean, it's kind of like a comic touch.
Yeah, but it's also like we see the window is like this bright yellow glow and it's being swallowed up by the darkness, which is the story of Ray's life. But yeah, Molly finds out that Ray has never been to an amusement park. I love how Ray is embarrassed by this and the fact that she's excited. I love it. I love her.
Yeah. I do like how Molly is starting to understand Ray more. Like, she clocks it pretty quickly that Ray is actually excited, even though she seems really grumpy on the outside. I really love that. And I like how their relationship develops throughout the movie.
Yeah. But unfortunately, they get there and all the rides are closed because the season hasn't started. And Ray's upset and disappointed. And that disappointment is so palpable. As a child, that disappointment is crushing.
Yeah. It's like one more disappointment in her life. Already, her mom lets her down and her dad isn't around. And she was just starting to finally feel excitement and hope again with Molly. But that is dampened yet again. I love that shot of Ray looking at the still teacup bride.
Yeah, same.
Her eyes, they look raw, like like she's been crying, and her expression is so hurt. With scenes like this, I don't understand the critics' reaction and reduction of her character to just being a hypochondriac. It doesn't make sense. I think her performance was so nuanced and so measured, yet still believable as a child. Just so well balanced.
Yeah, she does this thing where she can imbue pain into any line.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, also, we haven't really talked about, like, our germophobia and everything. It's like her desperately trying to have some control over her life, right? Because everything's kind of gone to shit.
To me, her phobia of germs is tied back to her dad. You know, maybe a fear of getting sick herself, or
putting him in more germs.
Yeah, maybe that. Or I can't remember if they mentioned how long her dad has been in a coma, but I mean, I'm assuming it's been a fairly long time, and she's grown up in that kind of environment where things have to be sanitized. So maybe it's that reinforcing these habits in her. So there's a lot playing into that character trait of hers. So yeah, again, the criticism seems very superficial.
Yeah, that's a great read though, because it's a parallel to Molly. Her life is ruled by her father's death and all the things that he left her, whereas Ray's life is ruled by the fact that the only world she's lived in is in this one, where her home is like a hospital, and that's ruled her life and her character.
Yeah. I have things to say about Coney Island.
Sure.
First off, I think an amusement park is such a great setting, especially a deserted one. There's something so haunting about it. When Ray wanders away, there's this shot of Molly walking past this pathway with these brightly painted colors, and it says fun games this way. And I love the juxtaposition of Molly just walking around through the empty paths, searching for Ray. It's almost like she's forced to retrace the steps that she took a long time ago when she was a kid and she had run away after her parents passed away. And so to contrast what is supposed to be a fun, cheerful place, there's this melancholy, which is of course redoubled by both of their disappointment that they missed the timing. And their ill-timed arrival also, I think, shows how distant from reality Molly still is, because her last experience at Coney Island is still very much wrapped up in that experience and her internal world. So much so that she hasn't considered the simple practicalities, like whether the rides will be open. It's like to her, Coney Island is always open.
Yeah.
It's a space that she's always occupying one way or another, and she's trying to come back now physically to heal herself with Ray as a companion or an excuse, whichever way we choose to look at it. But yeah, it's a sign, I guess, that neither of them is quite ready yet.
Yeah. I also really like how the closed amusement park is like this childhood and levity that neither of them can quite reach.
Yeah, exactly. Because an amusement park is a popular destination for families and a place where you spend time together, and neither of them have had that experience. On the way back home, there's this really lovely shot of Molly and Ray sitting back to back on the subway, and they're wearing similar colors, so you can see that even though they don't see eye to eye in that moment, they are reflections of each other.
Yeah. I do love that shot. But when they are home, Molly ends up telling Ray about how her parents passed and how it happened when she was mad at them. Ray's take is that being mad at someone means you don't have to miss them, so that's better, which makes her behavior make a lot of sense. She's always mad. Her anger is entirely her way of coping with her grief. And I love this whole sequence and talk between them, how grief is a complicated ball of anger and confusion, how neither of them can quite make heads or tails of it and are unable to truly move on. How that's all an inherent part of grief, that it never really lets you go and distorts everything. Grief is the teacup ride at Coney Island. And I especially like the line where Molly says, "The ride won't stop and I won't dare get off." It's like this fear of like what will greet her after, right? Like she she's too scared to get off the ride, to get over this grief, because she can't imagine living without it and finding something new after.
Yeah, it's like she's made a home in the feeling of discomfort, and even though it's uncomfortable, it's still familiar. I really liked the line where she's describing how the ride won't stop, because throughout the movie, we have seen these spinning shots. Even right at the beginning, when she's at the club on her birthday, there's this slowly spinning shot while she's socializing. And like she verbalizes here, a part of her is still in that space no matter where she is. And that's kind of been portrayed visually throughout the movie. And so when she talks about it here, it really clicks and falls into place.
Yeah, especially with how we actually see kind of like a flashback scene of young Molly on the teacup ride. And I like how it fades into Ray, like on her side in bed, but then she gets up and the camera
Spins
follows
with
her
her, yeah.
and rides itself. Yeah, it's really... God, the scene is pretty good. And I bawled. But the next morning, Molly sees Neil. He's sleeping with Roma from his label. I don't care. I don't know what the sad story.
Same.
But she's upset, goes to Central Park, and jumps off a bridge only to fall no more than waist deep in the water.
She barely makes a splash, too.
Yeah, that's so funny. But she gets nursed back to health by Ray.
The one thing I did like in the scene is that when Molly is upset and running, we see scenes of companionship around her that upset her even more. It's not just about having a romantic relationship. You can see that she's missing connections of all kinds because she sees, friends hanging out and a parent with their kid, and all around her, it's like a reminder of everything that's missing from her life. Now, what prompts her to jump in the lake? I don't know, but...
Neither do I. But their talk the night before prompted Ray to visit her dad. Ray kind of hasn't really interacted with her dad so far, so this is new. And Molly convinces her to actually talk to him even in his coma. And we see Ray do that with Molly's encouragement. I really like how we always see Ray's dad through this gauzy curtain. It's like his identity is hazy. It's both Ray's dad and Molly's dad. It's the vague idea of a father, because for them both, the real thing is long gone.
That is a really great take. And you know what was jarring to me is when, during her father's wake, they show a photograph of him right at the beginning.
Oh my god, you're right!
Maybe it's a sign of, he's no longer ambiguous father figure because Molly is learning to let go. But I don't know. I would have liked it maybe if they had left him as you say, hazy father figure. I really like your reading of that.
But we have the scene where Molly sees Neil's music video on TV.
Yeah.
I love the dynamic between Molly and Huey. In the scene, he reminds her that Neil Fox isn't real, that it's all fabricated by his label. Like, shit, I'm Neil Fox. That's what he said.
This is also where Molly sees Neil wearing the jacket that she disfigured.
Her jacket, her hook, her sheets.
Yeah. Everything comprising his image and his success.
I know it's intertwined throughout the whole movie, with Molly's dad and their circles and Huey's job, but the choice of it being a musical artist, a recording artist especially, does a lot for the point they're trying to make about how Neil isn't real and it's just a fabricated image. It works because we know, the history between Neil and Molly and how he got made into quote-unquote Neil Fox. In the scene, they're talking literally about Neil Fox, the star, and how that's not real. But it also applies to, Neil as a person and as a character.
Yeah. I kind of wonder, with Molly's dad also having been a famous musician, what this says about her, that she conflates Neil Fox, the musician, and Neil, the person. Because you'd think she, of all people, would be able to see through the facade, because she's seen behind the scenes. I guess the way I see it is that she's so used to just having the persona because her dad is no longer around, that that's all she can cling to. And so that's what she's used to doing, is taking things at face value.
Unfortunately, the scene ends kind of sad because Moo gets dropped off and Molly immediately knows that something's wrong, so she rushes to Ray and finds out that Ray's dad has passed away. And Ray has turned to ballet, an art of poise and precision, is what she says. And that's what she does to cope, and Molly gets fired.
Yeah. We get the scene where Roma tells Molly that she and Ray are letting Molly go. And I really like that Molly point blank accuses Roma of not knowing her own daughter and for giving her whatever she wants so that she won't actually have to deal with her. I think it's a great combination of everything we've seen between Molly and Ray so far, and a great reflection of how far their relationship has developed and how much Molly has come to understand Ray and, to read beyond the surface, which is something her mom doesn't bother to do. And in contrast to Molly, Roma saying it was a joint decision is a great way of showing how little she understands Ray, because this is clearly an irrational and angry decision by a little kid. She's blaming things on Molly that are completely out of her hands, yet her mom is rationalizing it because she has no idea how Ray actually feels and what is actually going on in her daughter's life.
Yeah. I adore the scene. I think they do such a good job at portraying it too. The actor for Molly has done a pretty good job so far, but I think she does an exceptionally good job in this scene, portraying the sheer anger over how Roma is treating her daughter. And not for a second did she make it about her or her getting fired. Roma is the one who brings up respect, but Molly's line about how treating her this way is not respecting her is a great take because it's true. The fact that she especially points out her age, how respect for an 8-year-old and say 28-year-old is what she says, are two different things. Put in the context of this movie and this narrative, that's such an interesting point.
Yeah, you can see that Roma has been treating her daughter like she's a 28-year-old, bringing her to a club, letting her do whatever she wants at home, not giving her any guidance or any kind of emotional support. She's been giving her independence as if she is a full-grown adult. And you might think that, what has she got to complain about? She's got this big house all to herself. She's got all kinds of toys in her room and everything she could ask for, but that's not how you treat a child well. It's neglectful.
Being nice to a kid is not the end-all be-all.
Yeah.
But fucking Neil shows up and wants to reconcile. And the fact that he tries to act all indignant and hurt when she brushes him off is so fucking manipulative. And Neil doesn't get what he wants, and so he immediately turns it around oh, now you're acting this way when you were chasing me, blah blah blah. But it's no, that's not what's happening right now.
Yeah, he frames it as him not being ready when she was chasing him, and now that he is, she's not interested anymore. So it's it's her fault, as if she has been the one who's been hot and cold this entire time. Whereas nowhere previously did we get an indication that he was interested in a relationship, but he was saying, just give me some time. He always seemed totally closed off to the possibility. So he's just constructing a narrative that didn't exist.
Exactly. He's reframing everything that's been happening this whole time. But yeah, Molly immediately shuts him down, which is great. But what she also does is auction off the collection of her father's guitars. I do like this underwhelming turnout for the auction. In Molly's head and in her world, her father is this giant figure, but at the end of the day, he ends up just being a man that died a long time ago. Him and his death has ruled her life, but everyone else has moved on. And this ties back into what you said about how Molly sees her father more as the, rock star persona than the man that she had in her life. And I think that's definitely exemplified here, where she's struck by the fact that no one seems to care that her father's guitars are up for auction. There's also this part where she touches the guitar and says, "This is my dad," and I just start bawling.
I really like that line. But yeah, an anonymous buyer swoops in at the last moment and offers a much higher bid than anything they would have gotten at $75,000. And with the money, Molly gets her own place.
She's growing up, but I would have to stay with Huey. People have roommates. You can still be a responsible adult with a roommate.
I mean, true.
Oh, Huey's place is so nice, and her new place is so shitty.
Well, speaking of her shitty new place, she's showing Huey her new place, and she's leading him down this dimly lit, narrow hallway and this tiny little staircase. And I really like the contrast to the grand building that we saw in the beginning, because it's like Molly has finally grown into herself and grown into her life. And I like that she still seems to be living on a high floor, since that seems to be her preference.
Very pretty woman of her.
Yeah.
But Huey gets a call from Roma, and they basically find out that Ray's missing, and Molly goes to look for her at Coney Island. And she's at the teacup, and they spin round and round miserably. It's grief again.
Yeah.
I love the shots of them looking at each other, which is framed as the camera, the audience. It really solidifies the fact that they're mirrors of each other. I also really like the shot of Ray holding on to Molly when they hug after, and how her fingers dig into her flesh, and you see like the pain and the force that she's using, because like Ray's so tiny. Everything she does, it doesn't look like there's a lot of force behind it. There's this part where she hits Molly and it looks like air is hitting Molly because she's so small. But then you get this shot of her fingers against Molly's back, and you can see the pain that she's holding on to and the force that she's exerting.
That's a great catch. Well, I've already talked about amusement parks as a setting, but again, I really like how it's this place where both their character arcs meet and they gain the courage to confront their respective traumas together.
To get off the ride together.
Yeah, exactly. You can see the impact of Ray having had to be an adult for so long, hiding her emotions, while Molly has been stuck in a moment of her childhood all of these years. And it's such a great setting for them to help each other meet in the middle and start healing, because, like I said, it's a place that's typically popular among families, and for them it's a place that initially stood for isolation and empty promises, and it was basically a trap. And we can see it transform into a place that they can leave together physically and emotionally. It's very visceral, the way that it's shot, and the abrupt snap to Ray throwing up because of all the spinning. And it's messy and it's painful and it's harsh, but it's also really touching.
Yeah, I'm with you. Everything you said. It's so good. I love it. So we have this funeral for Ray's dad, and there are lots of musicians there, and they want Molly to make clothes for them, like she supposedly did for Neil. I thought it was going to be that Molly's like, this isn't the time, but you can call me later. Because it seems so insensitive.
Yeah.
But Ingrid is there, and she and Molly reconcile. Them reconciling is cute, but I don't think it's a very satisfying resolution to their conflict or their arc. There could have been something interesting about being a friend to someone dealing with grief. How you can give too much of yourself to it, the way maybe Ingrid did, and either hurt yourself or hurt your grieving friend in the process. But they just kind of make up because they miss each other.
Yeah.
Because it's the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's a really great point. For what it is, I liked how simple their reconciliation was, that it didn't need to be filled with a bunch of words. But yeah, what you said would have been a lot more interesting. So I am definitely on the same page.
As it is, I also don't know what it adds to the main story and how it plays into the main themes. So.
It doesn't, really. I just like at least there's some kind of resolution.
But Molly and Ray have a talk in Ray's room. I adore the scene. There's this golden glow from the window that lights the somewhat dimmer room up and bathes the side of the actors' faces when they talk. It feels like a goodbye to this room and this stagnant adolescence they've both been trapped in. A goodbye to each other, as in a goodbye to this version of themselves, because as I've said too many times now, Ray is Molly. I mean, we even get this shot when we first walk into the room of Ray in her bed stroking Moo, and that's Kid Molly with Moo, and she's saying goodbye to the room at the end of the hall.
That's a great way to put it. I have a much less insightful comment. Ray actually offers Molly her job back, but Molly declines, saying that they're gonna be friends from now on. I really like how Ray's previous insult about there being no grown-ups in this room comes back when Ray says grown-ups don't tend to stay friends with children, and Molly uses it as a reassurance to say that there aren't any grown-ups in this room.
Do you think they'll be friends? I think not. I think this is too much of a goodbye. This is such a perfect goodbye. How can you stay friends? You gotta do it for the drama, you know?
Do it for the aesthetics.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought this was gonna be the end of the movie. I forgot about the actual end of the movie, and I wish this was the end of the movie. But Molly like applies to fashion school, but then she rushes off to go see Ray at her recital. We see Roma there at Ray's recital, like supposedly being a good mom, but again, this is not really like
It's not anything.
a real resolution. Although I don't know that I'm like mad about it, because the Roma thing has always been just in the background, and like we see when Molly confronts her, it feels like she's learned her lesson, kind of like she, you know, even though it's in the background. But Ray does a special performance for Molly with Molly's dad's guitars on stage and Neil playing Molly's Smile, the song by her dad, as accompaniment. I wish it just had been anyone but Neil. Just weird for him to be singing that song, for one. But also, get Neil out of here. I wish it had just been Ray. Just let this be a moment of Molly on her own, basically. Because Ray's Molly. So, like, just them on their own in this unidentifiable crowd. Just, yeah, what is he doing here? Get the fuck out of here.
I agree. And especially because we didn't see any kind of positive development in Molly and Neil's relationship, it still feels like a crossed boundary that he is singing the song Molly asked him not to in the beginning of the movie. I don't know what makes him think it's okay for him to show up again and sing that song and play her dad's guitar too.
I know it's supposed to be sweet, but the fact that the guitars are taken away from her only for him to get his hands on it, you know what I'm saying? It's like...
It's icky.
Yeah. I'm just like, you were the last person I want touching my father's guitar. But yeah, otherwise, it's a fine scene. If it's just between Molly and Ray, it's like a nice little, like, additional kind of dream-like sequence, you know? Even, like, get rid of the fashion application stuff. Just suddenly have her at the recital and Ray doing this for her. It also feels like Molly's watching herself frolic through the memories of her father one last time.
That's a great point. The other guitars also make a reappearance in the performance because Ray has the other dancers dance with them, which feels like a very little kid thing to do.
Yeah.
So I guess I can excuse it, but I was a little bit baffled.
Yeah, I wish like Neil hadn't been there and it had just been this like very childish performance from Ray. She's not doing like proper ballet, as I understand.
Yeah, she's freestyling.
Yeah. And it's very cute and very kid-like.
Yeah. Well, to end on a positive note, Ray is always quoting this philosopher or something, saying that fundamentals are the building blocks of fun. And I really liked seeing Ray freestyle because it's like while Molly discovered the fundamentals, Ray discovered the fun.
So, in absurd conclusion,
Molly has been in love with Neil's lucky jacket this entire time and not with Neil.
You're right. You did say it was the jacket pretty early on. It's true. I bet like all of the girls screaming his name are also just really infatuated with the jacket.
It's a magic jacket.
Yeah. It's Molly unlocked its powers. In another absurd conclusion, Ray's a figment of Molly's imagination.
No!
Okay. She's not. She's a fairy godmother.
I'll take it.
Yeah, and once, like, Molly leaves the apartment and the glowing room, it all kind of disappears. Well, now that we've discussed this movie in excruciating detail, have your opinions changed? Would you recommend this movie? A difficult question.
Yeah, it is difficult. Have I enjoyed talking about this movie? Yes. And was there a lot to pick apart and think about? Yeah. But did I enjoy watching the movie?
No.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, it's a weird experience.
Yeah, I went into this not knowing what to expect at all. And like I mentioned earlier, the movie poster really gives you no hints as to what you're in for.
False hints, I would argue.
Yeah, it completely throws you off. It was really interesting to think about it, but I don't think I would want to watch it again. And so I don't think I can recommend it. What about you?
I had the same experience as you. I didn't have fun watching it, even though I liked talking about it and there were a lot of interesting things about the movie. There's nothing wrong with the concept. The concept is so good. I love it. Even the execution was very good because we kept talking about like how all of these scenes are really well done.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Why this movie is not good? Why is it not good? I don't even know if it's not good. By all accounts, it's kind of good, but I didn't have a good time watching it. Not because it was sad either. It was just hard to get through. The movies just should be tighter, even though I don't know what to fix. Usually I have like 99 suggestions, but I don't know what to fix. Honestly, I can't recommend that you watch it because it's not a good time. I love the whole analogy about how the Coney Island teacup ride is grief so much that I think that alone might be worth experiencing the movie just once, just to encounter that concept and see how it's delivered via this movie. But maybe just ask someone who has seen this movie to describe that concept.
Just listen to this episode.
Yeah, just listen to this episode. Yeah, I don't recommend it. I do think that it's not worth 13%. It deserves like a decent rating, just like a not great movie rating. The critics' rating should be a matter of like the movie's merits, and it has tons of that. And I know that's pretty high, but it should be like 60 or above, in my opinion. And that has nothing to do with like whether or not you would enjoy seeing this movie.
It feels especially egregious because having read some of these reviews, they
didn't
haven't
watch
watched
it.
the movie.
Yeah. They watched New York Minute and then went to rate this one.
Well, you could understand the confusion. There were two blonde girls.
Oh, yeah.
And that immediately means chick flick, so I can't get over the review from Detroit Free Press that said this movie gives chick flicks a bad name. And I'm like, sir, of course it does, because it's not a chick flick. Like, if you're going to classify a not chick flick as a chick flick,
this
then
is the worst one.
You're not in for a good time.
I guess chicks can, experience grief too, so.
Yeah.
So that's all for this episode.
If you have any suggestions for movies we should discuss on the podcast, send them in at graveyard_slot on Instagram, the Graveyard Slot Podcast on Tumblr, or email us at thegraveyardslot@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Graveyard Slot.